So our last speaker is Marian Harbach. He is part of the Google Chrome team in Munich. He'll be presenting Don't Interrupt Me, a large-scale study of on-device permission prompt quieting in Chrome.
Based in Munich, and I'd like to talk to you today about what we'll do in Chrome about avoiding interruptions, unwanted interruptions from permission prompts. This is joint work with my colleagues Igor Bilogrevic, Enrico Bacis, Serena Chen, Ravjit Uppal, Andy Paicu, Elias Klim, Meggyn Watkins, and Balazs Engedy. But let's dive in. So first of all, let's clarify what I mean by unwanted interruptions from permission prompts. Here's an example. Let's say you typed in a URL or you clicked on a link, the page starts loading, but then immediately after that, and before you even had a chance to interact with that page at all, a permission prompt starts showing. This is obviously quite annoying, and it's situations like these where people mostly react with denying or dismissing this permission prompt. And basically that's a waste of time and effort, and it creates prompt blindness because all these unnecessary prompts just get people to react badly to them. Now, of course, the web and its APIs currently allows websites and their developers to create experiences like that. We're working towards changing that as well. That's not the subject of this talk, but if you're interested in that, come and talk to me afterwards. I'd love to chat about it. With this work, instead, what we're trying to do is sort of provide a more short-term relief to our users by removing these instances of permission prompts that are interrupting their flow. And for that, we implemented what we call permission prompt quieting. That was actually presented before in prior work at Usenix 2021. At the time, the quieted or less visually loud, if you want, permission prompts looked like this, as you can see on the slide. It was just an icon and a little bit of text on the right-hand side of the address bar, or it was a little notification banner at the bottom of the screen on mobile. These quieted permission prompts were triggered when one of three conditions was true. So either if the site was in the bottom 5% of sites by grant rate, if the user denied 3 consecutive permission prompts, or if they opted into this experience in settings. With this, and we did this only for notifications at the time as sort of the first example, because for notifications we saw sort of the most unwanted permission prompts on the web. With these fairly simple triggering conditions, we already had pretty encouraging results, namely that we reduced the average deny rate by 30%, which means that 30% of prompts were not even shown to people, and they did not have to spend energy on making a deny decision on that. At the same time, the average grant rate only went down by 5%, meaning that people who wanted to allow access to the capability mostly still could. The key problem was that only with these triggering criteria, we could only reach 3% of notification prompts and only 14% of users. So we wanted to do better, and that's what this talk is about. We'll walk through 3 things. The first one being what the quiet prompt UI looks like in Chrome today, and that's also what we evaluated throughout. And then I'll present to you an ML-based activation method to improve the reach of our permission prompt quieting. And finally, we'll look at a user experience evaluation of prompt quieting in Chrome. All right, let's get started with the current quiet prompt UI. So based on other research in Chrome, we realized that things on the right-hand side of the address bar weren't really all that noticeable and weren't interacted with all that frequently. But we still wanted to give people a chance to override. So we moved the quiet prompt UI to the left-hand side of the address bar, and we added a background to it to make it more obvious that this is clickable. And we call this the quiet chip now because it looks a bit like a chip. This chip will animate out from what is now the tune icon and what used to be the lock icon. It will then, after 12 seconds, collapse to just the icon, and after another 6 seconds, it goes away. During these 18 seconds, people can click on the chip to get the override prompt that you see on the bottom right, and where they can override the decision and still allow the capability with the primary button. Second, we added an even quieter version of this chip, which we call the quiet test chip, where we basically just swap out the tune icon for the crossed out bell icon. That stays for 18 seconds, and then again it goes away. People can click on the icon to get the override dialog, as you can see, and again override. So now, if you looked at closely the override dialogs, you might have seen when we show each of those. So the previous one, the regular quiet chip, we show that when our ML-based activation is in play, and we show this quietest chip when the site is in the list of site in the bottom 5% of the list of sites by grant rate. These chips also serve another purpose, and we added more chips to serve that purpose, namely reinforcing that there is a permanent control surface available on the left-hand side of the address bar, which we call site controls, where permission and security and other information is always available to users. And to reinforce that it exists, we also show chips when the permission prompt shows. We call that the request chip, and then also the confirmation chip, which appears after you make a decision. All right, with that, let's switch over to our ML-based activation approach. So to increase the reach of the permission prompt quieting feature that we have, we created a machine learning model. And we call this model Web Permissions Predictions, or WPP for short. This model is based on telemetry from opted-in Chrome clients, where we collect this data and then train the model on a subset of that data. We use the TFX framework and use a number of features that are detailed in the paper, and you can see an overview here on the slide. First, we use the permission type, because now we're not only quieting notification prompts, we're also quieting geolocation prompts. On top of that, we look at average action rates across all permissions, average per permission action rates, as well as the number of loud permission prompts a given client has seen at the time that the prompt opens. We also look at whether or not there was a user gesture prior to the prompt and whether the interaction happened on desktop or mobile. You'll notice that there's no client identifiers or URLs here in the list because the model is agnostic of that. The model is trained to achieve a precision of 95% or greater, which means that we have a false positive rate of maximum 5% to avoid quieting too many prompts. Once the model is trained, we ship the TF Lite version of the model to Chrome clients that have safe browsing enabled, where the model is then applied. To provide an overview and sum up sort of how prompt quieting works with this machine learning model, here's a little diagram. So let's say a permission request comes in from the website. Chrome first checks if that site is in the bottom 5% of sites by grant rate. If that is true, it'll show the quietest chip. If not, it checks if the user has opted into via settings, and then we show the regular quiet chip. If that is not true, we then check if the user has seen at least 3 loud prompts in the past 28 days, and that is so that we don't quiet all prompts and basically remove all the training data that we could work on. If the user has seen enough loud prompts, we go and consult the WPP model, and if that model's verdict is granting is very unlikely, we'll show the quiet chip. If not, we always fall back to the regular permission prompt. Now let's look at the effectiveness of our model here. As you can see on the slide, we collected telemetry in June 2023 with more than 10 million prompts for both notifications and permissions and geolocation. And the first thing is that our reach is now dramatically increased, right? Remember from before, we could only quiet about 3% of notification prompts. With this activation method, we can now quiet 43% of notification prompts and 24% of geolocation prompts, which is a 10x increase, and that helps our users a lot. Second, across all the quieted prompts, the WPP model is really the core reason why we quiet things. So in 96 and 81% of cases, the WPP model was consulted when we made a quieting decision. And then we have what we call post hoc precision and recall. Post hoc here means that we use the user's actions to derive precision and recall. For precision, that means in 1% of the cases, we showed a quieted prompt. Users clicked on the chip and then overrode that decision and allowed the capability access after all, which, of course, measures both the ability and the intent to override. With recall, post hoc means that in 4 and 17% of the cases, we showed a loud prompt and the user ended up denying, which means that we could have been showing a quiet prompt, but WPP said that we shouldn't. All right, with that, let's turn to the user experience evaluation. So to get at the user experience, we use what we call in-product surveys in Chrome, and they show when a particular trigger is met. And in this case, the trigger was the quiet chip showing. As you can see on the slide, a little survey invitation will pop up on the top right-hand side of the window, of the browsing window, anchored to the 3-dot menu, and it has a little invitation text and buttons to let you accept that survey or dismiss it. If you do accept that survey, you'll see one question on each page at a time. The questions auto-advance whenever you select the response option. And finally, the survey ends in a thank you message that disappears automatically. We showed 2.9 million of these survey invitations in 7 languages, and we received about 13,000 complete responses across 156 countries. The surveys had a median response time of 66 seconds, which is really brief. So we intentionally kept these surveys short so people could deal with them quickly. There's a central caveat here with this form of data collection, obviously, that I just wanted to quickly remind everyone of. Because the survey shows in the top part of the browser window and people self-select into taking it, if they don't notice anything is going on in that top area of the browser, including not seeing the quieted chip, they might also not see the survey. So those kinds of folks are underrepresented in our data here. But at the same time, using in-product surveys, we get data that is very contextually and ecologically valid, as well as we have a very wide reach that would be hard to replicate with any online surveying panels or similar methods. Okay, let's dive into the results. Let me check the time. All right. So the first thing we obviously cared for is how noticeable the chip is, because that's our central design criterion. We want the chip to be noticeable but not intrusive. So we asked people at the first thing in the survey when it started showing, did you notice the prompt? As you can see in red, about 50% said they did not notice it, about 10% said they weren't quite sure, and 40% said yes, they saw it. We believe, based on that we are striking a fairly good balance, and as not everyone saw it, but also not everyone didn't see it. The other thing you can notice here is if you compare the third and the second row in this chart, that the quietest notifications chip was noticed by 14% less folks than the regular notifications quiet chip, meaning that this being smaller is working as intended. The next thing we asked about is how helpful folks find prompt quieting, and we also provide a little bit of context with that question. As you can read at the bottom of the slide, we basically told them why Chrome is showing the chip in each of these conditions. As you can see in the green and yellowish bars on the chart, about 80% found prompt quieting at least moderately helpful. And again, the quietest notifications and the reason we gave for showing that resonated with people more, so even more folks found that variant of the quieting helpful. Still, there's about 20% of folks that don't really find prompt quieting all that helpful, rating it as not at all or only somewhat helpful. Let's look at why that might be. So after that helpfulness question, we also asked folks if they felt at all uneasy about the prompts being quieted, and if they said they felt at least moderately uneasy, we invited them to expand on why that is in an open-ended question. We coded that open-ended question into 6 categories, and 3 of these categories made up about half of the responses that we got. These 3 categories were wanting more control, feeling unsure what is happening, and perceiving the blocking as inappropriate in this case. Based on that feedback, there's a number of improvements that we're currently working on. The first one is reducing the false positive rate to manage that perception of inappropriate blocking. And we do that by adding per-site signals to the WPP model, such that sites that have best practices or follow best practices around permissions UX are actually less likely to be quieted. This is currently rolling out to everyone. We are seeing pretty encouraging results, and it should be available for all Chrome clients within the next couple of weeks. Second, the current string in the quiet chip didn't really invite action because it just said notifications blocked. Whereas we do want people to feel in control, and therefore we're considering changing that string to something that reads more like a question that invites action. We are in the process of testing different variants here, and yeah, we don't quite know how those play out, so I can't really give an update on that. All right, we covered a lot of ground already, so let me quickly sum up what I presented to you. There's 2 key takeaways. First, using the ML-based activation mechanism, we were able to increase the reach and efficacy of prompt quieting dramatically. That helps us to reduce interruptions and prompt blindness for even more users, so they can focus on the prompts that are actually meaningful and helpful to them. Second, based on our user experience evaluation, we find that most respondents find prompt quieting quite helpful, while also identifying a bit of room for improvement when it comes to perceiving control and false positives. As I mentioned, we're working towards improving on that, and you should stay tuned for more results there. Finally, if you're curious, there's more details in the paper. For example, the mental model of why Chrome quiets prompts, the subjective false positive rates that our respondents shared with us, as well as how easily people can find the override affordance. And with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Yeah, 1 second.
Hey, thank you. Would there ever be a specification for a lot of these prompts so a user can enable or disable them through Chrome or any other browsers?
I'm sorry, I had a bit of hard time understanding.
Would there ever be a specification that details, okay, for each of the prompts that you're going to present to the user of the website, you'll have to have a certain key value that states what the type of the prompt is, so that a user can enable or disable them through the settings globally?
So let me see if I understood this correctly. Are you wondering if there would ever be a way for websites to say, this is such kind of a prompt, so that users can go into settings and say, for this kind of a prompt, I don't want to see any prompts, or I want to see the quieter prompt, or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is possible for every permission type. So you can say, I don't want to see any notification prompts, I don't want to see any geolocation prompts, I want to see quieted notification prompts. That is possible today. But within those permission types, there is no further delineation, right? And from a Chrome perspective, I'm not sure we would want to have that just because it's effort for the user. Instead, we would rather work towards making the APIs better, so sites only show prompts that are necessary and helpful anyways.
Any other questions? So I had one question. In the machine learning model that you used, you mentioned several different features such as permission types and action rates. I was wondering if you did any study to see which of those features were the most effective for that model, for this task.
I think we did, and if you're curious about more details, Igor can probably provide more color.
Hello, everyone. I'm Igor, colleague of Marian. Yes, we did look at that, and it seemed that the users' actions rates were actually the ones that were the most important ones. And we also looked at different signals that we are going to also use in the per site rate, but the user ones were definitely at the top. So that's why we started also with those, and we could make them on device.
What were the action rates, for example?
Fraction of grants, or dismissals, or denies, or just ignores on the prompt itself.
Okay, thank you. So that's it for this session. Let's thank the speaker one last time. And enjoy the rest of your day.